I went to 2 residential schools, 1 year at Moose Fort Residential School in Moose Factory, and 1 year at Chinook Residential School in Sault Ste. Marie. And 2 years altogether I went. And for the longest time, I used to think that I was lucky that I came out of that experience pretty well intact. I thought I was intact. But this year, a lot of the hurt and the pain began to surface. And I realized that in order to heal, I had to deal with it. When I came into the room this afternoon, I didn't think I was going to be able to come up here and speak about my experience. But hearing what other people had to say, hearing the pain and the hurt, has given me courage to come up here and talk about what I went through. And it is especially difficult to talk about it because my father is in the audience. He went to residential school. And this is the first time that he's going to hear about what happened to me. You might think that 2 years is not very long. I didn't see or experience any physical or sexual abuse, but I experienced a lot of psychological and emotional abuse. And I don't think it's any less devastating to experience psychological and emotional abuse than it is to experience physical and sexual abuse. I was 11 years old when I went away. And I remember thinking when I went away, how can my father let me go? How can my parents let me go to residential school? My father was there. How could my father let me go? Knowing what I was going to go through. And then as I became older and thinking back about it, I realized that my parents had no choice. They had to let me go. And I don't feel any bitterness towards my parents. I love my parents very much. I love my father very much. I love my mother very much. I love you, Dad. When I talk to other people that went to residential school, we all said that we never talked about it to our parents. And I don't know why. I think that we knew how hurt they were to see their children taken away from them. Because I asked my mother one time, I said, how did you feel? And my mother said, because I never saw my mother cry when we left. And I used to think that it didn't bother them to see us go. And one time I asked my mother about it, and my mother said, I cried after the plane left. She wouldn't cry in front of us. She cried after the plane left. I'll tell you my story in 2 parts. I'll tell you a little bit of what I went through and a little bit of what I now think, and thinking a lot about it, what the effects of that experience were on my life. The first year I went away to residential school, I went to Moose Fort School in Moose Factory. I was 11 years old. And it was very painful for me to watch that video this morning because I could really relate to what some of those women were saying. I remember when we went there, one of the first things that they did was line us up all along where the bunk beds were. And there was about 20 of us girls all lined up. There was a chair right in the middle, in the front of the room. And one by one, we came to that chair to sit down and had our hair cut off. I looked down and I saw all that black hair all around the chair. Because there were other girls that were ahead of me. There was a lot of us that had long black hair. Now I think that must have been the beginning of the efforts of the residential school to cut me off from my Indianness, from my culture. I will never forget that sight of all that beautiful black hair piled up on the floor around that chair. And they did that to all the girls that were standing in line until all of us lost our hair. The next year, I went away to residential school in Sault Ste. Marie. I was one of the youngest, so they put me in the junior dorm. There was about 20 of us. There were 2 dorms on the 3rd floor, and there was about maybe 25 or 30 girls on the other dorm on the 3rd floor. And there was a senior girls' dorm on the 2nd floor. I had a cousin on the 2nd floor in the senior dorm, but I never saw her because we weren't allowed to go down to the 2nd floor. And there were 2 girls in the intermediate dorm, which was the dorm across from where I was. They used to run away all the time. I never had the courage to run away. I guess when I was small, I was taught always to listen to what I was told. So I didn't run away, even though I would have liked to. There was 2 girls that used to run away all the time. And they would get caught. And they would be brought back to the school. They would gather us junior girls in the intermediate dorm and make us line up along the row of beds. And they would bring those 2 girls in. They would pull their pants down in front of all us girls. And even if we didn't want to look, they would make us look. They would have those 2 girls lean over 2 beds and strap them with a strap. And I remember thinking, I didn't want to look. I didn't want to. I knew what they were feeling, the shame and the humiliation. I didn't want to look, but we had to look. And that happened quite a few times. And they were always the 2 same girls that would run away, and they would be brought back. And then they would get strapped in front of us. We were always lining up to go to here, to go there. It was such a totally foreign way of life from what I was used to. I come from a very loving home, close-knit family, an extended family. And it was so strange to live like that. So it wasn't like that in my home. I remember on Friday nights, we used to have, I don't remember very much of what we ate, but I know it wasn't enough because I was never full. We used to get fish on Fridays, fish sticks. And I think we used to get 2 or 3. And I really liked fish sticks. And I used to think, I'd finish them off so quickly because I really liked them. And I used to think, I wish I had some more, but I never had any more. And the nights were the worst because it was at night that you were alone with your thoughts. The nights were when you thought of your family, the family that you left behind. It wasn't your choice to leave behind. The nights were the time to think of the love and the security that we left behind. I lost a lot of my own culture, but I knew the only way I could get it back was to go back up north, and that's what I did. And my own people would call me white man because that's the way I acted. I acted and I did things and I said things like a white man. And it took me a long time to learn again about my own culture, about my language. I didn't lose my language while I was there. We weren't allowed to speak our language, but we would, sneak around and speak Cree when the supervisor wasn't listening. So we were able to talk to each other in Cree. But I lost a lot of it, which I had to gain back again when I went back up north after. Even to this day, I don't speak it. I speak it, but I don't speak it that well. When I hear the elders talk, there's a lot of words that I don't understand. And I think that's something that I may not ever get back. And that causes me a lot of pain, knowing that there's certain aspects of my culture that I still will never get back. It was very difficult for me to face this day because I knew I was going to be facing a lot of pain and hurt and tears. But I knew I had to face it because it's part of my healing. It's part of my becoming a whole person again. And I think God brought me here so that I could be part of this. Originally, I wasn't supposed to be a delegate. The delegate that was coming couldn't make it, and I replaced her. And I think it was God's way of bringing me to a place where I could face that pain and start to get it out of me, so that I could continue on with my healing.